This has not been a good day for Texas. First, Uvalde over a year ago, almost a year ago. Now, there's a new school shooting happening in Arlington. Here's the very list we know so far. 1 dead, 1 injured. And the student is arrested for capital murder. Take a look at the very latest so far.
We begin with breaking news in Arlington. 2 students are injured after a shooting outside Lamar High School in Arlington, just as students were arriving this morning. Fox 4's Dion Anglin joins us live near the campus with more. Dion?
Hi there, Dan. Well, the details surrounding this shooting continue to unfold. As you mentioned, 2 students are injured, one of them seriously, and according to police, the shooter, also a juvenile, is in custody. Now, this shooting started or touched off before the school day began. 6:55 this morning outside a Lamar High School entrance near the edge of a parking lot on the east side of the campus. Police tell us officers responded to 911 calls of shots fired. They were able to apprehend the youngster who they say did the shooting. They also recovered the weapon, but they are unable to say at this point what kind of gun was used. Now, of the 2 victims, one, a boy. He was shot and rushed to a hospital with serious injuries. The other victim is a girl. Her injuries are not life-threatening, and it is unclear if she was actually shot or injured in some other way. Now, we are told a parent drove her to the hospital. All of this while some others arrived to campus in disbelief.
I was right here behind that, right behind that cop car and stuff. I was right there, and then that's when I heard it, and so I just ran. And then after that, I just heard a whole bunch of sirens going off.
Right now, we don't really know what started the shooting. We don't believe that this was anything where the student was going to try and shoot multiple people at the school. We believe it may have been targeted, but we don't have enough information right now to know whether or not that is exactly what happened.
Well, a lockdown was in place immediately. Those students already at school at the time were bussed over to the district's athletic facility here on East Division. Now, it is where they will be released to their parents or adults designated to pick them up. All of the students involved in the shooting, we are told, the 2 victims and the shooter, are believed to be Lamar High students, but that is not yet confirmed. Now, of course, police say they are still investigating. It is early in the process, and as you heard in terms of what led up to this shooting, police say that they are trying to get to the bottom of this, but whether it was some type of ongoing beef or another plan, they are not saying at this point, or not speculating, but only to say detectives are working to find evidence and any kind of clues as to what led up to the shooting. That's the very latest live now here in Arlington. Dan, back to you.
But from what I heard, 2 students injured, 1 died in the hospital, and now the student is under arrest for capital murder. Now, if he's committed capital murder, if that student is committed of capital murder, that can end up in a sentence. That could probably have been a sentence of up to life in jail. So, that's the very latest from them. We'll if there's any more developments, we'll give you the very latest. But this is the update.
Start this half hour the same way we did the last. That breaking news that we have been following for hours. A shooting at Arlington's Lamar High School. 1 student shot, another injured. Other students arriving at the district's athletic center. As you see the buses entering that facility there. Those kids are about to be released to their parents. Our Megan Mitchell has been on the scene this morning and has the very latest with us now live. Megan?
Yeah, Jason, good morning to you. Right now we know that there is one student who is at a level 1 trauma center who is fighting for their life in critical condition because of this shooting. We also know that there was another student who was hurt in this, and that suspect, also a student, is in custody. As you mentioned, we're taking a look at some of the chopper video of those buses going from the school, Lamar High School, to a holding center where parents are going to be able to pick them up. And right now we know that that is happening at the district's athletic center, the AISD. And this is on East Division Street, but I want to bring you back to when this all started, Jason. It happened just before 7 a.m. in the parking lot of Lamar High School. This was around that time where drop-off was happening, so you can imagine there's parents in cars, there's students making their way into the building. Police say they received a call for shots fired outside of the school. When officers arrived, they found one student had been shot, another was injured, and they did find that male suspect also recovered with a weapon at that time as well. One student that was shot, as I mentioned, is in critical condition. We know they were male. They were transported by ground ambulance to that trauma center. Another student, a female.
So that's the last thing so far. But we got a lot more to come. Still ahead, we're going to play a T game. We're going to play a T game. Will it cause aggression? Or will it be normal? Judge for yourself. We're also going to play an animated game. Also still ahead, a Dateline investigation into hemophilia patients. Lee Thompson will have that story. But coming up next, we're going to hear from the police as they provide updates about this shooting. We'll give you some more updates when we return. Stay with us. Just 9 hours ago, the Arlington Police Department gave everyone an update about what was going on. What happened during that shooting. So let's take a look at bits of it.
I just wanted to provide you a quick update on the incident that occurred at Lamar High School this morning. Just before 7 a.m., about 35 minutes typically before school started, the Arlington Police Department responded to the campus of Lamar High School to investigate a reported shooting. When officers arrived on the scene, they located a male student with an apparent gunshot wound. That student was transported to a nearby hospital in critical condition. It is with great sadness that I announce that the student has died from his injuries. A female student who was in the area was grazed by gunfire and suffered non-life-threatening injuries. She was transported to a hospital by an adult male that was nearby. Witnesses were able to call 911 dispatch with a good description of the shooter. As officers was responding to the scene, they located an individual that matched that description. The officers surrounded the individual and took him into custody without incident. The suspect is a juvenile male, so we would not be able to release his name, but I can tell you he has been charged with capital murder, and additional charges are pending. He is currently being held at the Tarrant County Juvenile Detention Center. We recovered a weapon we believe that was used in the shooting this morning. Just want to make this point known that the shooter never entered the school building, and he left the campus immediately after shots were fired. The motive still remains unclear, and the investigation is ongoing. I just really want to thank the Arlington Police Department officers and the Arlington ISD personnel who responded to the incident. Their response was swift. The scene was secure in minutes. We train regularly with the school district, so we're able and we're prepared to handle incidents like this. And I'm extremely proud of the job that everyone did today. On behalf of the department, I would like to extend my deepest condolences to the family of the victims and to all of the students and staff at Lamar High School. Our hearts are with them. We will continue to work lock in step with the district to make schools a safe place for the students to learn. I'll close with this. We need our community's help to ensure that guns do not end up on school campuses. We need gun owners to step up, to be responsible, and to ensure that they properly are securing their firearms so kids don't have access to them. That means using gun safes, gun locks, and not leaving the guns unsecure in cars or other places where kids can get them. With that, I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Marcelo Cavazos, Arlington ISD Superintendent, MARCELO CAVAZOS. Before I get into the details of our response today, I wanted to share our heartbreak. We prepare for incidents like this, but it's impossible to prepare for the emotion. Today, we're heartbroken. Heartbroken for the families of the victims, the victim, the staff, the whole Lamar community. And I encourage everyone to continue to keep Lamar High School, Arlington ISD, in your thoughts, your prayers, as we grieve today. Immediately when the shots were fired, our staff at Lamar High School opened the doors, brought the students in, and went to an immediate lockdown. That lockdown lasted for several hours as the Arlington Police Department conducted their investigation. At approximately 11 a.m., we began the reunification process here at the athletics complex. I want to thank our staff, our principal, and all our staff that worked on this reunification process as well. Schools deserve to be a safe place for students to learn and to grow every day. And today, we're heartbroken. We will continue to work with the Arlington Police Department as they conduct their investigation. We will not have school tomorrow at Lamar High School, and we'll have counselors available on Wednesday for any student or staff that needs help. And we will continue to provide that service as long as it's needed. I want to personally thank the Arlington Police Department for their partnership every day, but specifically today. They have our full support as they conduct this important investigation. Turn it over to the principal.
Andrew Hagman, principal of Lamar High School, ANDREWHAGMAN. I want to say how thankful I am to the Lamar staff who responded very promptly to help get students into a safe position and to tend to the students who were hurt. I'm so proud of the efforts today, and I'm very, very proud of our students and for how they responded. It was before school started, and the fact that the kids had to respond as quickly as they did to such a tragedy and to such an urgent situation, I'm just beyond grateful, and I'm beyond thankful for how well they followed our instructions. They listened to APD and to our staff, and I'm thankful that they are safe today.
So with that, we'll open it up for a few questions. Again, keeping in mind that we may not be able to answer all of them.
Are all of the students involved current students of Lamar High School?
So that was the portion of the conference. So I'm glad that they responded. So does this go back to Uvalde? Probably so. But like they said, there'll be no school tomorrow. Counselors will be there, and there's still more updates, but we'll keep you posted what's going on. And on our future shows, we'll update you. Coming up next, we're still looking into more of these violence in video games, on the video games. The one that caused this school shooting, today's school shooting. So what is the big deal? We'll tell you that next. Stay with us. For the past 2 days on this broadcast, we focused in on violence in video games, like the subject I talked about last year. That was back in 2019. That's when we went to season 2. We focused in on why video games are causing school shootings. We focused in on the ESRP system. It's basically an updated version, basically an updated one. So, in case you missed part 1 and part 2, we focused in on the ESRB, the history, the ratings. We've also played a little bit of an M-rated game because the biggest one ever has got to be a rated M game. Because if you look on the box, it says M for mature. It means its content is unsuitable for teens under the age of 18. In this example right here, this game contains intense violence, blood and gore, nudity, mature humor, strong language, strong sexual content, and use of drugs and alcohol. That's one of the biggest gripes ever because really, it causes aggression and violent tendencies. And it doesn't cause someone to go out and go shoot someone with a gun. And we have a teen game waiting on us, and that teen game is an EA Sports game called UFC 2. It's an official product of the UFC. So we're going to walk you through it. We're going to walk you through the game. And then we're going to walk you through it. So this is rated T. Blood, lyrics, mild-suggested themes, violence. That's a sports game for your teen to get their hands on. But while we wait for that to load, let's talk about hemophilia. Now, hemophilia is described as an inherited bleeding disorder in which the blood does not clot properly. It can lead to spontaneous bleeding as well as bleeding following injuries of surgery. Blood contains many proteins called clotting factors that can help stop bleeding. And in tonight's story, you're going to meet some people who did not stay silent for long until it was too late. You also see a newsletter that from back in the 80s that could really shed some light on what's going on. So I need to reach more people. Here's Lee Thompson.
Should have at least given these people word that every time you put that needle in your arm, you are playing Russian roulette. I don't appreciate it that they played God with my children's lives.
Louise Ray's 3 sons are among the thousands of hemophiliacs who got the AIDS virus by injecting a blood product that was supposed to heal them, not kill them. This is Ricky, Robert, and Randy Ray in 1987. They were all born with hemophilia, a bleeding disorder among males that prevents blood from clotting. Like most hemophiliacs, they were treated with infusions of clotting factor, a concentrate made from the blood of up to 20,000 donors.
The only thing that I knew about factor is that it was this miracle drug that made it easier for hemophiliacs.
It was a miracle. Beginning in the 70s, instead of having to go to the hospital for treatment, hemophiliacs could finally treat themselves at home. And if swelling or bleeding did occur, patients started using it even when it wasn't absolutely necessary.
So we thought it was great, and we never questioned it because we didn't know that we could.
The Rays say they never would have used factor had they known the risks, that in the early 80s, just one donor with AIDS could contaminate thousands of bottles of clotting factor. Once they were infected, the Ray brothers paid a heavy price. They were barred from school. Their house was burned to the ground. Today, one son, Ricky, is already dead. And Louise knows that inevitably she will lose 2 more.
I have to wonder every morning when I get up, is this the day that they're going to get sick? Is this the day that we're going to go down that road that I went with Ricky?
There were 20,000 hemophiliacs in the United States in the early 80s. By 1985, drug companies had found a way to heat factor to make it safe. But by then, it was too late. We now know over 12,000 people were infected with the AIDS virus. Nearly 2 out of every 3 hemophiliacs. Almost an entire generation wiped out. Today, hemophiliacs are outraged because they have discovered most of those people didn't have to die, that it could have been prevented.
Facts don't lie.
Once silent, hemophiliacs are looking to place blame.
You nailed that son of a bitch.
In a strange twist, they're not only suing the companies that made the factor, but the very organization that claims to protect their interests, the National Hemophilia Foundation, the NHF, which doctors and patients trusted for information not only about hemophilia, but also about AIDS.
They should have decided in favor of safety, and they didn't.
The National Hemophilia Foundation is supposed to have been there as an advocate for us. They took away our choice and our right to make a medically informed decision for our children, and that's wrong.
Do you ever step back from this and say, almost everybody I represent is going to die?
I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
And this is the man that many hemophiliacs blame the most, Alan Brownstein, the executive director of the NHF since 1981. Hemophiliacs charge that because of the NHF's close ties to drug companies, Brownstein and his former medical advisors failed to adequately warn them. There are many people who say you just didn't do your job in the early 80s. And as a result, they're dying.
We did all that we could, and I just wish we had more information so that we could have made decisions that could have saved more lives.
But as the nation's chief consumer advocate for hemophiliacs, the NHF had plenty of information. What it did with it was another matter. A 6-month Dateline investigation has uncovered disturbing evidence that at a time when factor was known to be contaminated, the NHF continually downplayed the danger of using it. In July of 1982, when little was known about AIDS, the Government Centers for Disease Control alerted the NHF that for the first time, 3 hemophiliacs had been discovered with AIDS. And the CDC indicated all signs pointed to clotting factor as the cause.
We thought, first of all, that we had to get the information out.
And several days later, the NHF did send out the first of a series of newsletters. While it advised patients to consult their doctors, it emphasized the risk of AIDS was only minimal, and that CDC was not advising a change in treatment. In other words, keep using the factor.
The newsletter said the CDC does not recommend changing treatment. That was just not true.
Dr. Donald Francis was one of the leading scientists at the CDC during the outbreak of the AIDS epidemic. Francis and his colleagues repeatedly warned the NHF about the danger of injecting factor. And by the end of 1982, he says, the NHF should have seen what was coming.
And we were already expressing at that time our fear that half of hemophiliacs might die of this disease.
If half their members were going to die of AIDS, that fear did not seem to be reflected by the NHF.
They're the watchdogs. And I felt like if there was any problem with the product, they would make sure that everybody knew about it.
On March 26, 1983, Dana Kuhn, a minister and a hemophiliac, broke his foot playing in a church basketball game. At the hospital, even though his injury was not serious, as a precaution, they injected him with clotting factor. It was his first and only injection. Is there a word that can explain how you feel?
Betrayed.
And the reality is that you're living with a disease that has no cure.
Right. And my children are living with a nightmare that they don't know when their dad is going to develop symptoms and die of AIDS.
What Dana Kuhn never knew was 3 weeks before he received what would be his fatal injection, the CDC issued an even stronger statement that blood products appeared to be the cause of AIDS in hemophiliacs. But the NHF newsletter 5 days later failed to mention that.
Why weren't we getting warned when you had all this information? That is when we should have been totally warned, and it should have gone over the wire, and people should have had a choice.
It would be 3 years before Kuhn would discover he had contracted the HIV virus. By then, he had unknowingly passed it to his wife. Patricia Kuhn died 21 days after she was diagnosed with AIDS.
Did you ever dream that she would be the first to go?
It totally destroyed my life when she died. And the toughest part was to tell my children. They didn't understand why their mom died. And they would say, it's not fair. It's not fair. Why did God let my mom die?
And what's even harder to understand is why, nearly a year after the CDC's first warning, the NHF sent out this May 1983 bulletin with a headline, NHF urges clotting factor use be maintained. By then, the death toll was rising, and thousands who weren't already infected were still at risk.
Clotting factor was not an essential to the survival in hemophiliac. There were other options for treatment. To say that NHF urges clotting factor use, at least I feel at the time, was a death sentence to lots of people.
Mr. Brownstein, what does the headline say?
Oh, NHF urges clotting factor use be maintained because at that time, the risk was minimal from what we knew. And keep in mind that the leading cause of death of people with hemophilia was bleeding that was not treated with clotting factor. It's clearly an error. It was clear that the leading cause of death in hemophiliacs was not bleeding, but already in January of 1983, the leading cause of death was AIDS.
And Francis and others charge the NHF never placed enough emphasis on the link between factor and AIDS. Dateline reviewed all of NHF's newsletters from 1982 to 1985, and although there were some references to potential risks, not once could we find any clear warning not to use factor because it could lead to AIDS.
And nobody, including my own company, issued a warning.
Tom Dries is the former head of one of the companies that makes Factor. In the early 80s, Dries says he was fired for trying to make the Factor safer. He claims that while the companies put profits ahead of lives, the NHF looked the other way. Why would the National Hemophilia Foundation side with the pharmaceutical companies in an issue that it knew was killing its very own people?
Because it got a substantial amount of its income from the pharmaceutical companies. And over the years, they were always after us to make more contributions. They funded a project here and there, but the actual operation of the foundation, zero.
They were doing things for you that wouldn't have been done if they hadn't paid for them.
That is correct. That is correct. And those that is quite typical to get support, but it's also, we are honor bound to make sure that this support is done without any strings whatsoever.
There was no conflict of interest
Zero.
in the early 80s with these pharmaceutical companies.
Zero.
But the drug companies certainly took advantage of NHF newsletters. On May 11th of 1983, you put out this bulletin saying, NHF urges clotting factor use be maintained. Do you have any idea how the pharmaceutical companies use this bulletin?
No, I know how we use it. I know how we send it to our physicians and to members of our community.
There are 2 memos sent to sales forces. Dateline has obtained these 2 1983 drug company memos with that NHF newsletter attached urging patients to inject factor. Doctors confirm that NHF information was used to push sales. They took your bulletin and they took it to hospitals and to doctors and said, this is what the NHF wants to go on. Now please buy my product.
Could I see that?
Absolutely.
I haven't seen that before.
Were you aware that your bulletins were being used as sales tools?
Not in this fashion. I mean, I expected that anyone would carry them around, but it's a little bit uncomfortable seeing it being used in this way.
In your opinion, did the National Hemophilia Foundation sell its soul to the pharmaceutical companies?
Yes, absolutely.
There's no question in your mind about that.
No.
And from 1983 to 1985, even as companies finally began to recall batches of factors they knew could cause AIDS, headlines and NHF bulletins kept urging that product withdrawal should not change use of clotting factor.
I mean, there was dangerous product being recalled, and they're telling us to continue to pump this into our veins.
If the National Hemophilia Foundation had said, we've got to clean up this factor, do you think the government would have done something differently?
Yes. There would have been tremendous pressure on the government by a consumer group that was using the material to make the material much safer.
And people might be alive today.
Thousands of people.
In my opinion, they are guilty of my child dying. They are guilty of my other two kids who will probably die in the future. They didn't think about the families that were going to have to live with this every day.
Whose fault is it that almost all of the men in America who have hemophilia are HIV positive or have already died?
I know that the National Hemophilia Foundation did the best that it could with the information that it had available.
And you think you did enough?
No. How could I say we did enough when we look at the results? Enough was not done because the ultimate judgment is the results, and the results are lousy.
Since completing our story, this update. Tom Dries, who said he was fired as head of the Alpha Company for trying to warn of the danger. Well, a spokesman for Alpha told us Dries was let go because he was not fully focused on the company. Meanwhile, a class action suit filed by some of the people in our story against the NHF and makers of Factor continues. The drug companies say they did the best they could with the information available at the time.
I would probably agree, but if you had a cure for it, I mean, you need to just, I don't have enough words to say this, but if there's no cure, I mean, I don't have a lot to say about this because I really wasn't around at the time, but I'm glad for people speaking out like this. Because everyone told their side of the story, and I'm really glad that happened back in 1993. So, now we know. Let's check up on our T game here on the UFC. It's ready. The game's ready and we're ready to play when we return. Stay with us. Alright, we are talking about violence in video games we talked about 2 years ago. Now we're on to the T section here, and the game I'm playing right now is UFC 2, which is Ultimate Fighting Champion from EA Games. Games rated T, has blood, violence, lyrics, and malsuggestive themes. So,
major professional heavyweight title in MMA or boxing.
So let's take a look.
Our tale of the tape for this heavyweight collision. Verdum is 5 years his elder. He Fabricio Verdum. Cain Velasquez. Here we go. Fight scheduled for 3 5-minute rounds. Black trunks for Velasquez. White trunks for Verdum. Fabricio Verdum is one of the best submission artists to ever fight in the UFC's heavyweight division. This decorated multiple-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion has radically improved his striking over the years to catch up with his already elite ground game. Timing his strikes nicely. Another hard leg kick from Cain Velasquez. Absolutely. Oh, there's a kick by Cain Velasquez. One of the most powerful fighters to ever compete in the heavyweight division. He's just proved once again how he's wrestlers have evolved. Big left hand. Nice knee to the body. He hurt him with that punch in the clinch. There it is. Got the takedown. Connects with the punch. Man, that's just good ground and pound. Looking for a triangle, throws one leg over the shoulder. He got out of the triangle. Sweeps, look at his position. He's got the single leg takedown. Man, he's got the reversal. The swelling on his eyes is starting to get really bad. And there's the reversal. Nice shot. That's a big punch to the head from the top. Turned around into full guard. Nice left by Velasquez. Back to his feet. 20 seconds. Final seconds of round one. Round one comes to a close. Round two is underway. Comes out swinging. He misses with the left hook. He scores with the leg kick. That's a damaging knee to the body. Huge leg kick.
So I think you probably get the picture here that something like this would happen. So I think it's probably a good game for your teens to play if they're into fighting. Alright, now to our M rating section, which has a lot of strong language. The Guy Who Won't Die, Deadpool. We're going to let that load, and we'll have our next, and while it loads, we'll have the next story coming up, so stay with us. That was a story about a mother's struggle to save her children from a cult in a faraway country. You may have never heard of the children of God, but it's out there. In public, members constantly invoke the name of Jesus, but in private, they repeatedly seek sex and sex as a way of knowing it. So, really, it gets you on the edge of your seat. So, I should warn you. The subjects you're about to see in this report are quite graphic, and we urge children not to watch this. Here's Tom Jarrell.
Vivian Shalander is 35 years old. She lives in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. A year ago, Vivian appeared to be a typical American woman, going through a routine day, caring for her 4-year-old son, Yancha. But if you looked closer, you'd have seen that her life was in shambles. She was an emotional wreck because her 4 other children, John, April, Caleb, and Tito, were trapped and had been for their entire lives in a destructive cult called the Children of God. Vivian believed, though she wasn't certain, that they were living halfway around the world in Bangkok, Thailand, with their father, Richard, who's also a member of the cult. She had not seen her children for over 3 years. Heartbroken, she desperately wanted them back.
I made it a cause and a purpose in my life to get my children out of that organization. When you know that something is wrong, you can't sit back and let your children live that. I mean, to never know anything else. I can't sit back and let that happen.
Vivian herself was a member of the cult for 13 years, and during that time, all of her children were born. A few years ago, she escaped with her youngest, Yancha. Later, she became driven to get the other children out because she understood the abusive practices of the cult which she had abandoned. The Children of God was started in 1968 in California by this man, Moses David Berg. Years later, ex-members would call him demonic, evil, psychotic. But in the beginning, everything seemed very innocent. Berg preached to the hippie generation about Jesus and recruited them to join him in his all-consuming drive to save souls. Berg's entire family belonged, including his youngest daughter, Faith.
We're just going to get out there and sing and dance and give testimonies and show them the love of Jesus.
Today, 20 years later, the cult continues to operate. Members estimated in the thousands live all over the world in communal houses. Berg himself keeps his whereabouts a secret, but he manages to maintain strict obedience from his followers through a series of commandments written in so-called Mo letters. But what's most striking about the cult is Berg's philosophy when it comes to sex.
I practice what I preach, and I preach sex, boys and girls, hallelujah.
In 1973, Berg introduced a practice he calls flirty fishing. His older daughter, Deborah, who left the cult in the late 70s, explains the term.
Well, Dad got the terminology from fishing, what Jesus said in the Bible, to go out and fish for men. And so she was going to use the women to fish for the men, to bring the men to the kingdom of God through flirting. Only the flirting was more than flirting. It was actually, religious prostitution.
For Vivian, practices like flirty fishing made her doubt her commitment to the cult.
I don't care how many scriptures Moses David came up with, justifying it. When I read it personally, it didn't say that to me.
A Children of God spokesman claims they stopped flirty fishing about a year ago, in part because of the spread of AIDS. But the practice, very disturbing to Vivian, was in full swing when she was a member of the cult. And even more alarming to Vivian were Berg's sexual doctrines involving children, the very age of her own.
God created boys and girls able to have children by about the age of 12 years of age. My God, now he's going to advocate childhood sex. He's going to advocate child brides. Yes.
In fact, this Children of God publication has a chapter called My Little Fish, which shows photos of children in suggestive poses. Here the caption reads, "That come hither look." There are also photos of children together and with adults.
Is there a Mo writing, thou shalt conduct incest?
His writings point to it. Yes, they do. He has writings where he has definitely said it's okay.
According to Berg's daughter, Deborah, Berg himself has had an incestuous relationship with his other daughter, Faith, for years, although they both deny that's the case. In fact, a spokesman for Berg told 2020 that he does not advocate incest. Yet Deborah claims her father did approach her for sex, and that was the catalyst to her leaving the cult.
My dad was just an evil personality that was not hearing from God at all. I had to quit looking at him as the man as my father, but as a leader of a worldwide movement who was destroying people's lives.
The same destructive forces drove Vivian out of the Children of God. July 1984 was her turning point. She left Bangkok, Thailand, where she had been living with her husband Richard and their 5 children, And she returned to Sioux Falls with only the baby. The cult leader, she said, wouldn't let her take the others. Reportedly, keeping children is a cult policy. While longing for her 4 lost children, Vivian lived here in this small apartment in Sioux Falls, disoriented, unable to hold a job, and subsisting on welfare.
How did it affect your daily life when you thought you might not get them back?
Oh, I wanted to die.
Halfway around the world in Thailand, the children continued to live the lives of cult members. They were programmed to perform on the streets to bring in new converts, and they often traveled to refugee camps along the Thai-Cambodian border with their father, Richard.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus.
Incredibly, the children sometimes perform before crowds of refugees. Although they were far away, they were never forgotten by their mother, who finally in December of 1986, after nearly 3 years of recovery from the harmful effects of the cult, decides she's ready to go after her children. The task seems overwhelming, but she's determined to try. As her plan unfolds, each step is crucial for its success. June 1987, Vivian hires Mike Entravia, a private investigator, to head up the operation. September 87, she joins the First Baptist Church of Sioux Falls and makes an emotional appeal to the entire congregation for help. They agree to take on the cause, eventually helping to arrange over $25,000 in loans to help fund the investigation.
What compelled you to help her? You must have a lot of people that come by wanting help.
Not very many of them have quite the same kind of story.
November 1987, Vivian is granted temporary custody of her children. This is crucial because without this court ruling, the investigator, Mike Entravia, will not carry out the operation. But now with all systems go, the operation shifts to Bangkok, Thailand, on the other side of the world. By mid-January 1988, Vivian, Mike, and his assistant, Scott Biondo, are all there. The search is underway. Mike and Scott spend long, exhausting days looking for the children, but with no results. The investigation is adrift, and Vivian's confidence is shattered.
Can you imagine 3.5 years just waiting? I mean, I have cried. I've really agonized. I could try to say it's a hopeless cause, just leave them where they are. I can't do that.
Desperate, Vivian and the investigators decide to focus entirely on the Thai Immigration Department. On January 28th, the children's father, Richard, has an appointment here to renew his visa. Yet there's absolutely no certainty he'll show up, because if he doesn't, there's no serious penalty. A long shot? Yes. Still, this looks like their only hope. So Mike and Scott meet with immigration officials. They agree to help as long as their identities are protected. An unofficial deal is struck. If they learn of the address of the father, they'll tip Mike off. It's now Wednesday, January 27th, the day before the big gamble.
My feelings about tomorrow is, first of all, yes, it is a big day, and hopefully it will be that big day. It will be the day where everything goes down and everything goes down smoothly.
Later, the three meet for a last-minute planning session where Mike describes the possibilities for the following day. For instance, what if Richard comes into immigration with the children? Or what if he doesn't show up at all? Or
Richard comes in without the children.
All right.
Okay, which is probably going to be the greatest likelihood. They will require him then to bring the children in that day, and we'll come in and recover the children. And
Vivian is warned to expect resistance.
Be prepared that the kids may not want to go. You don't really know what they've been told over the past years. And what I'm really getting at is your emotions. And try not to let it really hurt you. Okay.
Mike then places a very tough decision in Vivian's lap. What if Richard shows up in immigration, but with only 1 or 2 of the 4 kids? Does she want Mike to seize those children on the spot and hope eventually to find the others? Or does she want the officials to bluff Richard and tell him to return the next day, hoping he and the kids won't vanish, never to be located again?
It's a hard decision, and you know, you're going to need to think about it, and just tell me tomorrow morning.
Faced with a decision no parent would want to make, deeply torn, Vivian holds off.
To me, it's a terrible choice to have to not get all the children. My purpose in this whole thing is to be successful. I want them delivered from an organization that is destructive.
And what an organization and destructive organization has. So what would you do if you were in Vivian's situation? When we come back, you're going to the conclusion to this story. You're going to see firsthand when the investigators drag the children into the van. Then you're going to hear Richard Schlanger's side of the story as he says he wants the children back. Tom Joe with the conclusion to bring her children home. Stay with us. Before we continue on with to bring her children home, what I want to point out to you guys is this has been the past. Move you guys over here. For the past 3 days, this has been a great experience. Looking at all these rated games from behind the shelf. Although I do have some PS2 games, but that would take a while for me to set up everything up. So this would have been a great experience. So the question is, if you're a parent out there, what do you need to know? Well, for starters, if you're going to buy a child first skin, the number one thing you need to know, you need to look at the box. You know, you go in the video game section, you look at the video games, your first child, and then your child goes, Mommy, can we get this one? And you just say yes. Don't say that yet. You need to look at the box. Okay, it's M. You look at the back, and it's like, oh, all this? No way, son. How about get this instead? I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, after all, it is E, and it has mild lyrics in it, and you'll probably be good at it. So, yeah, I think it'd be good. Or something like this, which is a good game. Because anyway, it's NASCAR or whatever. Matter of fact, your child may like Lego so much, it made me through all these Lego games. Lego Batman, Lego Marvel Superheroes 2, and the Avengers. So, that's number one. Number two, you need to monitor what your child plays. I mean, the key here is we want what's best for our kids, right? So know what's best for your child by getting the best game ever. The best first game to get the best first game ever to get is an E-rated game, like a sports game. Like I recommend the game show category to the sports category. That way you'll know. Like Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, football, basketball, baseball. That way you'll know what's best. And you can decide what's best for your child. When you're in the teen thing, you need to monitor E. And for E, just don't monitor the stuff. Now to go to the teen, you gotta supervise because a lot of times kids may be acting out. Now again, we'll show you this with Super Handy, but they're gonna block me for showing this. Now, the biggest gripe ever is an M-rated game. If that happens, what you need to do, supervise your child. Because a lot of times these games cause violent aggression and violent tendencies. That's the cause of this. So that's the tips. That's the biggest tips. Again, if you want to learn more about this, you can check out part 2 and 3 of this. You can even check out the one from 3 years ago. We'll have all those links in the description below. And I'm gonna start, and we'll have more on the newsletter at substack.givemeabreak.com, where you'll find more tips and information as well as videos talking about this. So, really a great thing to look out to, and probably someday we'll look more into this, and we'll probably look into violent movies because the Motion Picture Association of America has its own rated system. That's why R-rated movies are. That's why we make laws saying that minors can't buy movies under 18. Well, under 21 ID, but probably won't be better. All right. Will Vivian ever get her children back, Or will Richard fight? The conclusion to this dramatic story when we come back. Stay with us. Well, we're now out of time, but we're going to continue this on Wednesday. Now, will Vivian ever get her children back? Or will she forgive, or will she forget the children? Will they ever be reunited? Will they get out of the cult? You're going to see the dramatic climax to the story as the children get back to America and escape their father Richard. You'll also hear Richard's side of the story. Was there sexual abuse at the home? And what does the family psychologist say? And what does the psychologist say? You'll hear both sides. You'll hear all sides of the tale as we conclude to bring her children home. I'm telling you, when I watched this, it was really heartbroken. I showed this to my mother, and it was just really heartbroken for me to watch. Along with the cult, and after that, you also gave me another person who was in the Children of God. His name? Actually, I don't know his name, but you will see that horrific videotape. His name is Ricky Rodriguez. You'll see that horrific videotape. And you may judge for yourself, because this suicide was caught on tape. You may see for yourself what happened. That's on Wednesday. That's Give Me a Break for this Monday going to Tuesday. We'll see you again making a break Wednesday. For everyone here at YouTube, good night, everyone. And we'll also bring the very latest. If there's any more developments in that shooting here in Arlington, Texas, we'll give you the very latest. Good night, everyone.